The Wiltshire Wildlife Trust has many nature reserves around the county, but here in the Wylye Valley, Langford Lakes Nature Reserve is a fantastic little gem. It's a diverse habitat of wetlands and reed beds and wet meadows, nestling between the mainline railway between Salisbury and Warminster and the A36. But here we've got lots of different habitats for people to come and enjoy, and lots of places for birds to call in on passage.
Well, when it was gravel pits, we used to come in and get gravel for various things around the farm. It was always termed as dug. As dug was the gravel just as it came out the ground. And it was a commercial enterprise. I always remember it being muddy. People obviously couldn't come around unless there was a purpose. Then when it became a trout lake, a lot of people wouldn't have come around because it was a private venture. But then when Wiltshire Wildlife came along and explained what they were doing, it was just like a gift from heaven, and people were very happy with that, and at long last they could walk around and enjoy it. A lot of the bird life has been encouraged, which is very different to what it was when it was just a muddy gravel pit.
When I first came, it was a wonderful, wonderful site, but it was being used for commercial purposes, and I never imagined then that, years later, this would be a fantastic nature reserve owned and managed by the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust. What happened was that, first of all, the commercial fishery decided that they were going to close down and to sell. And having known about the site, I thought this would just be too good a chance to miss, and we really must do everything we can to try and safeguard this site and to develop it and actually improve it and enhance it to make it a much better site for wildlife. And so the first thing was to persuade other people about our vision for this site. To raise the finance was always going to be a big challenge, and the only way really we could see ourselves achieving that was to seek grants, such as from the Heritage Lottery Fund. But crucial to that sort of funding, you have to show that there is local commitment. And one of the very early things that happened was somebody locally said to us, look, I was going to leave you some money in my will, but actually I'd like to give it to you now. And that was a really important starting point, because we could then go back to the lottery and say, look, this is the commitment we've got locally. And because of that, the lottery then started taking the application a lot more seriously. It was quite a struggle to raise the finance, but once we'd done that, we were able to buy it. It was just a fantastic moment to have acquired it. The four objectives of the site were to make sure that we created a haven for wildlife, and this really was a nature reserve. We wanted it to be a centre of excellence for angling and conservation. We wanted it to be a centre of excellence for environmental education, and we wanted it to be a place where the local community felt welcomed and that they could come and enjoy it on a regular basis. But sometimes those different objectives can cause conflicts. We need to make sure that we don't have the haven being disturbed by the educational activities and so on, that we needed to be able to separate out different parts of the site, and we just did that by zoning it. There aren't that many sites like this in Wiltshire. Wiltshire is a county where there's a huge amount of chalk, so there's not a lot of surface water. And so having lakes like this is a real bonus and incredibly important for wildlife. So the things that we've got here now at the moment are breeding season, so we've got birds pairing up, starting to make their nests, lay their eggs. We've got the courtship displays of the great crested grebes. We've got tufted duck and mallard. We've got gadwall. It's a wonderful sight for bird lovers to come and just see how many different species of birds there are. And I think we've recorded well over 150 species of birds now on this site. The River Wylye is a site of special scientific interest and has been designated under European legislation as a special area of conservation. It is internationally famous as a chalk stream, and here it is flowing through the site, and it offers us a wonderful opportunity to protect and safeguard a wholly different range of species. If you pick up the stones and look under the stones, you'll find no end of mayfly and caddisfly and all sorts of little invertebrates. Those are the building blocks for the river. We do allow fishing to take place here on this river, and at the same time what we're able to try and do is to encourage active participation by angling organisations, looking at how we manage the fishing, how we manage the river and how we manage the lakes. So it can be good for fishing and incredibly wonderful for wildlife too.
My name's Peter Hayes. I've been a fisherman for 66 years. I find the whole business of rivers totally fascinating. I cannot pass a little stream without wondering if there might not be a fish in it. It's what I really care about. The reasons why we've been improving the river have a lot to do with the lower flows that we've got nowadays. So what we've been doing is to re-energise the river by narrowing it, by getting energy back into the water. This is helpful to the weed and to everything that lives in the river. And the effects you can see all the way up and down this stretch, where if it had been left to its own devices, it would be very much shallower, flowing with much less energy, and be a much less good place for the wildlife, fish, fly, birds, water voles and everything else to live in.
To make it easier for people to come and enjoy the wildlife here on the site, we've got 5 bird hides where people can come take shelter from the elements. And then when you get inside here, you've actually got somewhere to make notes, so we encourage people to actually record what they've seen, and actually that's a great opportunity for people to learn about what they might expect to see during the course of the year by what other people have seen.
Since the Wildlife Trust have taken over, I mean, they built the hides, which is the major thing really, but for everyone. Because you can now get quite close to birds. I mean, maybe you need a telescope from time to time, but most of the time anybody who comes in with a pair of binoculars, even a child, can recognise most things, which you look in the diaries and they actually do recognise them. At the moment, the species that you would probably see on a half-hour walk is chiffchaff, blackcaps. There's a lot of blackcaps around. There's at least one reed warbler and quite a few sedge warblers. And we've luckily just seen a little gull fly in, mainly probably due to the fact that the rain came down heavy and it's brought it down from somewhere, but it seems to have disappeared at the moment. The site as such is brilliant for everybody. A good example of that would have been that we've had this rare duck here, ferruginous duck. We've had sort of expert bird watchers, twitchers here, the same day as you've had novice bird watchers and children running around, so I think that's really good. I think it's good for groups to mix and not everyone to do their own thing all the time.
This bird's already got a ring on it, as you can see, and again you've got to go for the thighs. My name's Rob Turner, I'm an A-ringer, and today we've come to Langford to put up some mist nets, and we hope to catch some birds, put some rings on to make them individuals, obtain information from them, release them, and this information will go to the headquarters of the British Trust for Ornithology and become part of the national database. This morning we're really pleased with the number of juvenile reed warblers that we found, because we also have a site over at Trowbridge where we found that the breeding success was very poor this year, probably due to the nests being washed out. But here we've already caught 4 or 5 young reed warblers, so that's encouraging, and it could well mean that Langford had had a successful season.
Langford Lakes is a key part of the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust education strategy, and it's key to get children out and engaged in wildlife at an early age. Children have a natural affinity to nature, they have a natural wonder, and we're here to try and encourage that and to foster it. They are the future guardians of the planet. We need people to be doing conservation, we need people to be enjoying and protecting nature.
I'm Anne Billinge and I'm part of the education team, so I work a lot at the Langford Lakes where we have school parties come, particularly during the summer term, to do lots of activities. Today we're being mini beast explorers, and the first task is for the children to discover who's living in our stream here, which comes off the River Wylye, and we're looking at how they're adapted to living in this particular habitat.
Can you see that animal? Has he got 6
I found lots of new creatures, and I found a lot else about them from the guide, and I was very interested in what happens with them. I never knew frogs, if you touched them, your skin would hurt their skin. And I discovered that there was a fish called a bullhead fish.
Part of the experience of the whole day is to get children out of the classroom, getting in touch with nature, and I think part of that's the memories they take away from coming here.
Across there and then
My name's Anne Cole, and I've been volunteering for the wildlife at Langford Lake for about 8 years. Today we've got a special volunteering day, and that's because we've acquired a new piece of land about 18 months ago, which we're now working on, and we're wanting to plant a whole lot of reeds, and we've had a delivery of reeds today. So we've been here unloading the lorry and transporting the reeds down to the area where they're going to be planted.
On the nature reserve we've got 3 lakes, and we would call those deep water lakes. They're not that deep, but they're still deep for wildlife. What we wanted to do here on this new land that we were able to buy from the Andrews family is some shallow water and an area of reed bed, because we want to create more diversity of habitats, to create more opportunities for different species to come and actually make their home here at Langford.
My name is Malcolm Birch. I'm the senior contractor for Wiltshire Rural Services, which is part of Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, and at the moment we're right in the middle of the site of Langford Lakes. Initially the first part was the flight ponds at the start of the site over in the far corner, and then that's followed by the main lake, which is in the centre, and then behind there's another area which we term as the moat area, which is like a shallow lake with deep water around the outside. This will allow reed growth to be in the inside like a large island, which will give plenty of protection and cover for birds when they're actually on the site. But the flight ponds, being open areas, long stretches of water, is what will actually attract the birds flying in. So they'll see these open channels and then come in on that route, as it were.
My name is John Peters, and I've been volunteering for the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust for about 3 years, and this is a big project which it's very exciting to get involved in. I like seeing all the wildlife, the birds in particular of course, and hopefully there'll be a lot more when the reeds are planted and growing and everything's off and running properly.
going to do for the next hour is we're going to have a little tour of the reserve. So if you've all got wellies and boots on, what we're going to do is head straight down the path to the far end of the reserve to look at our new land and the reed bed system. So we've got the footpaths to put in.
It's very interesting that they're actually creating a habitat because we need nesting places for these birds and because so many are disappearing.
What actually made me join at this moment was seeing the new project that's being completed, weather permitting. I thought, well, the money is really being spent in a good way, and so it was worth helping in that respect.
I think the ongoing work is going to be really interesting, and it's going to open up so much more for people to come, because at the moment there is just the one ride through and back. But if that's extended, and I have been down to the river, I have seen it before, so when that walk is opened, it's a lovely place for children to, paddle and picnic.
I've got a first grandchild on the way. I'm hoping that she will have something inherited from the region to enjoy in her later life, and that this site continues to develop.
A lot of it is on the flint. And so it's a bit like trying to drive a hole through concrete, but if you can just find a little gap between the flint and the mud, then you can actually just make the hole so that you can then put the reed in. I feel really an enormous sense of satisfaction that so many people love and care for this place, and that together, working as this huge team of people, all with a different role, different function to perform, we've been able to create something which really is incredibly special, a real gem of a site nestling here in the Wylye Valley. It's fantastic, and it'll be here for generations to come.